and I wish I had been here, but it's wonderful to have this space and this gathering of creative people, and I'm sure that you will find it inspiring to hear from somebody who has been on this journey much longer than all of us. And so I'm going to, Uncle Wole, I'm going to ask you a few whimsical questions as well as a few semi-serious ones. And the first whimsical question I want to ask you is, what do you do when people are so much in awe of you that they try to go and, look for the biggest grammar and so on to engage with you and all that? How do you handle that?
I sometimes...
yeah, we can hear you, please.
I sometimes wonder which is more difficult, creating a new work or retrieving yourself. Because it's a good question. It's always a marvel to me because I've never felt terribly different, drastically different between yesterday and today. I wake up being what I was yesterday, and then hopefully I'll wake up tomorrow also feeling exactly what I feel today. So I've never really appreciated what is expected of one, simply because one has written a number of books, attained this notoriety. So the struggle has always been just insisting that I want to be with me, with myself. I love my company. I love what I am. And I don't want people dictating to me what I should be. That's as elementary as that.
Oh, well, okay. So because I read in the when you were 80, Iva Jumandia put something together. And one of the entries was about how it terrified your students that they went to memorize dictionaries and so on so that they could come to your class. And then you told them that they had written the most unintelligible essays. But, let's come back to, you say who you are, but it's a bit difficult for us to really tell who anybody is through their creative writing. Are we expected to find you in your creative writing? And if so, where are you?
Well, before I answer that question, I think I don't often have the opportunity to share my experience, shall we say, my rites of passage, certain critical aspects with young people, especially those who have to earn a living like we had to. You asked the question of people that I terrify my students. You see, I was trained to do that. I was very lucky that when I finished at the university in Leeds and I decided to study theater, I went to London. I was supposed to be studying for something else. And to survive, I did a lot of supply teaching. Supply teaching means that you register with the local council, teaching organization or whatever, and you leave your phone, and whenever there's a vacancy, you are called upon to go and teach that course. And that meant that I taught everything from mathematics, which I knew nothing about, to even knitting classes. I would say, well, sorry, Mr. Soyinka, what's available today is a class for knitting. I said, that's okay. My mother taught me how to knit. I'm on my way. And that meant I went through various kinds of schools. from some of the most hoity-toity schools to the most, alarming, real slum schools, where the students were, first of all, bigger than you. They felt they were tougher than you, and that they felt they could do whatever they want in your class. And all the school needed was just somebody to keep, because they were obliged to keep the children, these quote-unquote children, thugs really, in school, because that was the law. And so all they really wanted was keeping them in order. And so I had to devise various means of letting them know that I was not easily cowed. And I would say things, because they would threaten you, really. They'd say, oh, I'll bring my uncle to come and beat you up. I'll bring my father, I'll bring that. I say, well, listen now, let me tell you. I came from a continent called Africa. We are cannibals there. I will beat you up, I'll beat your father up, and I will eat both of you, I'll cook you on the school garden. They believed me. And so I learned how to instill terror in students from that experience. So translating that into intellectual warfare was child's play with me. Maybe that's why I seem to terrify my students. But it's not true. I actually got on very well with my students. Now, the creative aspect. What was your precise question? I've forgotten now.
No, well, you were talking about wanting to be you and insisting on being you. And I was asking whether we could find you in your creative writing. And if so, where are you? Can you give us a hint?
Oh, no question. I'm very easy to find there. Just split me into about 1,000 different parts, and you'll find I'm littered all over the book. But I haven't really tried to try and recreate myself. But inevitably, I think all writers will agree that no matter the genre, that what we put down is really part of what we are. And maybe it's a question, the rest is for the literary critics, the analysts to decide what is the proportion. But there's no question at all. Even the rascals, the most dangerous characters in my plays, there's, I think, a certain aspect of those characters which I will concede exists latently in me, which is why I think I'm able to enter the character. At least that's my theory about myself.
Can I be totally politically incorrect and agree with the rascality bit of it? Because I can, that I see. But talking about going from the page to the stage, I'd just like you to share the fact that you are a total artist who doesn't just write, but also produces, performs, and so on. I just want you to share that experience a little bit with us, from the page to the stage. Yeah.
Sorry, could you repeat the last part?
Okay, no, just for you to share your experience of doing that, of being that total artist. Yeah. Can you share it with us, how it's been?
Well, let me go back a little bit to childhood. I was not just a voracious reader all the way from childhood, but a precocious one, apparently. That's what my early teachers told me, and my parents also. And I read everything. Newspaper advertisements in Yoruba language. I remember the newspapers on my father's desk. He was a school teacher, so he had a small library. And apparently I consumed those, his small books in no time at all. At the beginning, they didn't believe it. And they would do the usual tests, and I seem to have passed. And also, you also come from that tradition of storytelling, where parents, uncles, even visitors just staying at the house will gather the children around and tell them stories, folk tales, morality tales. And gradually, I realized that I was never satisfied with, and of course afterwards, when we met, we try and repeat what we'd heard, including the songs. And I knew I was never satisfied with repeating the stories the way I heard them, the way they were originally narrated.
Right.
So fights would break out in which my siblings or peers would say, that's not the way the story went. I say, sorry, but I think that's the way it should have gone. So, and I think it was from that kind of an instinctive will to reshape even what I was told.
Right.
That I carried into school, into the school magazine, into the early radio station in Nigeria when I listened to these short plays on the radio.
Right.
Those days they were not transistor radios, they were, those boxes. Rediffusion boxes. We call them in ththose days Asoro Magbesi.
What does that mean?
Meant the box which speaks but receives no reply. And that's the way language also came into my life, the way we were treating even what we received in our own language. And that's the way it went, and plays, theater, send in my short stories, my so-called poetry at the time. I'm sure I'd be embarrassed to read some of them today. Because sending them to newspapers, even outside the country.
Yeah.
And gradually, it seemed to be something which I felt I was born to do.
Right. Right. But I'm quite interesting about, in the fact that you yourself would produce your plays, and in that sense be a practitioner, and so you were part of that aspect, also the performance aspect, and I'm just interested in that experience.
Okay. Now, let's go back to what I said earlier,
right.
which one is transforming the narrative and so on. Well, that very process, what does one have to rely on except oneself? In other words, one is already indulging in the act of, if I were in that situation, how would I handle it?
Okay.
And so one is already giving of oneself to the material that eventually
ends up.
One re-narrates or one puts on paper. I think that's the process.
That's a process. But is there a time when you've seen a performance of any of your plays and you've said, that's not what I was intending? And how does, I'm a critic, I'm not a writer, so I don't have that problem. I'm the one who causes the vulture. Somebody does their work and then you go and criticize them. But I'm saying that, you put your work out there. Somebody then goes on to perform it. Well, what's one? Is there a really bad one that you saw and said, no, this is not it?
Well, let me make a confession that even when I don't separate completely, but I believe that the moment your work is out there, it's out of your control.
I know.
There's nothing you can do about it. In fact, I automatically, and this has always been with me, license any school, any institution, any genuine amateur group, which wants to do my play, because I believe that once it's out there, it's no longer entirely my property.
Yeah.
Also, I carry this to the extent that even when I direct my own plays, I lock the playwright out.
Okay.
Absolutely. Because when a play goes on stage, you're already thinking of your audience.
Right.
The environment. You're not about to put it on exactly as you conceived it.
Right.
It's shaped, the presentation is shaped even by the physical environment of the play. Where you enter, where you exit, how much sense, what's the sense of rapport you feel with the kind of audience
Right.
who's going to come. Everything affects it. Now, that doesn't mean that I've not had the most agonizing moments when I've made the mistake of going to see what somebody did of my play. The only thing to do is to walk into the night, go into the nearest bar, and feel sorry for yourself and drown your sorrows. On the other hand, there have been those moments when the presentation has certain aspects of the presentation have been a revelation.
Yes.
In which you actually discover in what you have written already, thought you had finished,
Right.
certain unfinished aspects or introduction of some integrated significance,
Right.
character, relationship, etc., etc. So it's a mixed bag.
Right.
And I think this is one of the excitements of theater.
Of theater,
I don't
yes.
like the novel, except, of course, you're lucky to have a film company snatch your, buy the rights to your novel.
Yeah.
And sometimes they just buy it, so they own it, and they
Yeah.
keep it. Nobody else can get at it for ages. But in theater, it's a work constantly in progress. The work is being reborn.
Right.
And that's why I find theater so exciting. And that's why I feel so superior to novelists, because we get the best of it.
But Uncle Wole,
They have to go and sit down and
you're
start
all-
writing another novel all over again, whereas you can continue working on that play or watching others reinterpreting it
It's-
to satisfy.
but you're also a novelist. I mean, so. But I mean, I was so excited to discover that you had written a novel in 2021, and I mean the span of your career, and the fact that you're writing now in your 80s, it's stupendous. I mean, I don't even know what to say. Can we give him a round of applause? I know he doesn't need it, but it's just. But why did you write this novel?
Well, I'm very careful when I say this because sometimes it sounds precious, but it's a fact, and I think most writers will agree that writing itself is an admission of a masochistic streak in one. So your question is well put. Why does one into a wiser, riper old age continue to be a masochist? And the answer is that maybe other preoccupations are far more masochistic than
this one.
writing. But it's for the other professionals to look inside their own and decide. But in this particular instance, actually, when I veered onto the novel, I knew this would come up. So I was already preparing an answer. Take my first novel, The Interpreters.
Yeah.
I wrote it when I didn't have a company to work with. The circumstances were such that I was not working with my usual company. And it's a lot building up inside my head. And the prose prose fiction seemed to be a way of relieving myself of that material. The second one, Season of Anime, I just come out of prison spell, and so I wasn't back with my acting company, and the creative, the material of creativity was in there. There was the Civil War, the horrors of it, the pretensions, the profiteers, and all that I had to get out. So I wrote Season of Anime. Now the third one, The Chronicles, which is most recent. One advantage with the novel is that it can adopt as wide and broad a canvas as the novelist wishes.
Right.
You can kill off your characters quite comfortably and put others in there. In theater, if you take out one, you've already got a huge gap. You find a way of getting another one in there. And our circumstances on this African continent, and most especially in my own country, Nigeria, were such that the expression of them required a really large, loose canvas, far more than could be captured on stage. So you could say that the novel had been boiling up inside me for a number of years. And there was such a nature, the material was of such a nature that I had to get out of the environment of that material to be able to begin.
Right.
And so I hid out in a village in Yena for some time, off Dakar.
Oh, yes.
Because I kept looking for somewhere where be isolated, away from Nigerian newspapers, Nigerian media completely. So I wrote a chunk. Left there, went back to earning a living. Then again, I kept looking for another spell, break. And I found it right here in Ghana, in Aburi.
Yes.
And ex-President Kofo lent me a mansion,
yes,
in which he had not even occupied. And I must say this, unlike Yene, the little village where I lived like a monk, in Aburi, I was a baron. I lived sumptuously. The staff brought food for me 3 times a day, which meant they put on weight. I didn't. And it was really great. The environment was very calm, and I detached myself to such an extent that, I don't know, those of you who know Nigerian history, that before the Civil War, there was the critical conference. It took place in Aburi.
Yes.
Sometimes I think people call it Aburi, whatever. We
Yeah.
call it Aburi. Anyway, and that building was just some walking distance from that mansion.
Yes.
I refused to even go inside there.
Okay.
Because I didn't want anything at all to. So I used to look at it. I just didn't want anything to remind me. And so there I stayed another 10 days or so and put down another chunk. Then there was another long gap. And then what happened? COVID. So even though I made sure that caught me in Nigeria, I was isolated in my forest.
Okay.
And of course there was a lockdown everywhere, so that was also. So the 3 works took place under very special circumstances.
Right.
Not as an expression of a métier in which I feel comfortable.
Right.
At all. No, I keep stressing that I'm not really a novelist. And the 3 were just accidents, happenings. Fortunately, at least the last one seemed to have found some resonance among many readers.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I want to, since you came to Ghana, I'd like to ask about if you have memories of your earlier stay in Ghana, when you came and you were part of a literary scene that was very vibrant from my memories as a child. I have a sort of kid, perspective of sitting on the back benches of the drama studio and watching you work and listening to you talking to various writers and so on. But what can you tell everybody about that time? Because sometimes I feel that right now it's hard to find inspiration, on our continent. And so it would be great to be elevated a little bit by some of these memories of yours.
Well, As I said, I'd come out of a spell in prison, most of it in solitary confinement, and I needed some quiet. I got used to the quiet, the isolation. I remember, first of all, I took refuge in the south of France at a cottage, in a cottage belonging to the late Gerald Moore. You know, he had this ramshackle farm, which is split in two, one half of which was occupied by an Italian and his wife. I called them the Italian. The wife seemed to be on the lunatic side, you know. So their conversation used to penetrate into my isolation, where I was in company of rats. You wanted to see the size of the rats on that farmstead. Anyway, I was able to write The Man Died There in that same atmosphere. Then, of course, I had to go back and earn a living, and finally I got this offer of a visiting professorship here, and I was very glad to be here. Compared to Nigeria, it is quiet, calm. The contrast between Ghana and Nigeria at that time was really remarkable. As my favorite story when I was staying here, which I adapted from a saying of a friend of mine from the Caribbean, it was comparing the island of Barbados, the Barbadians, with the Jamaicans.
Ah, yes, okay.
And the favorite story was a man and his wife sitting down, and the man said to the wife, "Hey, darling, I think there's a snake sitting on that cupboard." And the wife would say, "Yes, what is it doing?" I said, "Well, I think it's looking at me." I said, my wife says, "What are you going to do about it?" "Well, I'm going to decide. Do you think you can bring me first some kenke and fish? And when I've had some of that and some pepper, some papushito, I may be able to see if I can spit in his face with the pepper from the sun." That man was the Ghanaian.
Oh.
A Nigerian, before anything, I'd always say, "Yeah, Kwarikwa, Ejo, snake. Hey, we'll rouse the neighborhood. Everybody will come with sticks." They beat that snake to death.
Yeah.
That was the contrast between the Ghanaian and the Nigerian when I was here. Today, however, I think Ghana has become Nigerianized.
Oh.
Yes, I think even the personality of the average Ghanaian has taken over the coloring of the Nigerian. So, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing is irrelevant. But that change, I've noticed it each time I came over here. You're all becoming more Nigerian. So when I'm looking for refuge the next time, I'm going to skirt. I'm going to look for it somewhere else.
No.
Becoming very Nigerian.
So could we, I'm going to push you a little bit back to that time, and if you can discuss some of the people, some of the writers that you interacted with, and you know, what kind of atmosphere, you know, was created among you at that time, you know?
It is very mixed. And there's a cautionary coda to that story I've just told. And it was something which I found very startling when the quote-unquote revolution took place.
Yeah.
And it was extraordinary to see these calm, normally calm, lethargic even, reflective people pouring out on the streets, crying, blood, blood. This is after the executions began.
Yes, in
I was shocked.
79,
I
yeah.
was shocked. I was here at a time of starvation, shortage, the criminal corruption of the leadership, including the so-called military reformers. I was editing the magazine Transition at the time. I remember we carried a story of how an entire boatload of cocoa was stolen, diverted and stolen by some of the military rulers, I think some of whom actually got executed. I recall, for instance, actually having in my possession a note from one of the military heads of state to the chairman of the central bank, just ordering, I forget how many CDs at the time, to be handed over something in green ink, in his green ink. Remember that? So within that society also, there were severe contradictions. And I was here when eventually Rawlings took over. I was here during the killing, the murder of those judges, whose vehicle was found in a ditch and so on, and the so-called inquiry took place. I was involved in trying to save the lives of Chikata, remember?
Right.
We had to work when Acheampong wanted to execute them and so on. We had to work around the clock, and we had to then Kofi Awuno was also in prison. So it was also a place of unexpected turmoil.
Yes.
And there's another side of the Ghanaians came out that day, which really shocked me, But the ability of the Ghanaians to cope during that shortage was really most impressive. You had teachers, lecturers who would arrive, finish their lectures, get into their vehicles, and go and do taxi work to survive. Straight away. I think it was called, no, it wasn't Kalabule. Kalabule was supposed to be hoarding.
Yeah.
But that was okay. And they would come back to the staff club, have a beer, get back in their cars, and do taxi work just to survive. Things were that bad.
Bad, yes.
So no one was really surprised when the coup took place and the Ghanaians had had enough and poured into the street. Blood, blood, blood.
I know.
More blood, more blood. Oh, it was terrible.
Yeah.
So that's the other side of Ghana also.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so we need to move on a little bit. But I'm going to be very selfish and ask you about the role of mythology in your work. I'm not, it's an impossible thing to do because that could take us a whole semester's, teaching and stuff. But because I feel a little bit of a disconnect between ourselves at this stage and our mythologies, at least in Ghana. Only a few days ago, there was another literary festival. And there's a wonderful presentation of storytelling with mythology and a film and everything. And somebody in the audience said, Africans, what I'm worried about is that the writers and the filmmakers are not thinking scientifically, and they are going into this mythology, and when will we develop? I want a comment from you on that.
Well, first of all, I'm a compulsive mythologist. No question at all about that, because mythology, at the heart of mythology, really, you'll find immense, free, accessible mythological paradigms, which you, as a creative person, can use, can twist in any way you want. Either celebrating the mythology itself and the personages of the mythology, of the myths, or using them as critical paradigms for contemporary society successfully. This happens in all societies.
Right.
And it'll be a great waste, I find, if we decided to turn our backs on mythology, saying it's backwards, it's unreal. Everything is unreal. Religion is unreal. The so-called world religions are glorified mythologies. And yet there are structures all over the place, all over the world, dedicated to even some of these killing mythologies. How much more? Why then should we turn our backs on harmless mythologies, which are just resource pools for triggering off the imagination in numerous directions? We should worry more about these glorified mythologies, which call themselves religions, and glorify the dehumanization, right, left, and center. Those are the ones we worry about. And I think we should also worry about the new mythologies, the new myth makers, who even threaten to make us, the archaic mythologies, obsolete. I'm talking about the mythology of internet. Call it social media or whatever. It's interesting. I was very happy about this, the theme of this conference. Because for me, it gives us an opportunity to really ask the question, from whom are we now retrieving the narrative? Is it from the old colonial cultures? Is it from the external mythologies, religions? Or is this task today one of retrieving authentic creative material from the trolls of internet? Call it fake news or whatever you want. The real enemies of creativity today are the mythologists of internet. Irresponsible, feeling no sense of obligation, no sense of human dignity, no capacity for projection of the harm which is being done by the new mythologies, the new myths they are creating on the internet, virtually from nothing. It's not even the mythologies of Nollywood or Gollywood. I think that's your own.
Yes,
that we should be worrying about.
The horrible word, isn't it?
Anybody who doesn't know those are, well, something, that's their problem. But the myths which have been implanted, really brainwashing the minds of new generations, distorting history, contradicting actualities and contesting those actualities and presenting them as reality. I think those today are far more
dangerous,
more pernicious than even those old imperial colonial mythologies. We weaned ourselves away. There's some new mental colonizers on the internet, and I think those are the ones we should be worrying about now, and really evolving strategies for combating them and neutralizing them in any way.
Thank you very much. I think that's an amazing way to put a pause on our discussions for a moment and ask if anybody else wants to ask you questions at this stage, because I'm just, there's so much we could talk about. So let me turn now to all of us here. Is there somebody who's going to help us identify people and so on? Okay. Ayikwe, you didn't even let me finish talking. Okay. All right. Yes, please.
Hello, and thank you for gracing us with your presence.
Would you kindly introduce yourself, because it would be good for him to know.
My name is Ni Ayikwe Parks. I am a writer and wanderer. I have a question about the work no longer belonging to you once you've finished it, because I am a huge admirer of your preface to Death and the King's Horseman, where you actually tell the Europeans how not to produce the play. So you weren't, in that case, you didn't just leave it to people to just interpret. So I'm just wondering, why, for that particular play, you felt like you had to put that preface there?
So why for this for Death of the King's Horseman, you felt the necessity to put in a preface to guide, its production? Yeah.
I anticipated a certain direction. I work in the theater. I've watched theater all over the world. I've seen how people treat material that is culturally alien to their own, that they don't even take the basic, caution, at least to come as close as possible to the cultural intent or content of the work of art. So I felt, what does it cost me? A few lines there. Say, please don't go in this direction. That's all. Yeah. One should do what one can. And after that, I'm sorry, the work is out of your hands.
Right.
But you can help the actors.
So you're not
you can
immune
help the
to help
director.
him. Thank you.
Okay, Professor Anyidoho, is there somebody who can help me give him my mic, please?
Thank you very much for this session. I had the privilege of being in Nigeria when they organized a series of activities marking your 60th birthday.
When what, sorry?
60th birthday.
60th, oh, okay.
And at the National Theatre, there was this wonderful situation where a production, you just mentioned it, Death and the King's Horseman in English was going on in one session. You could walk out of that and go into the next session of the theater where the translation into Yoruba, Election Oba, was being staged. The thing that I've never forgotten, and I keep telling my students each time we have to read Death and the King's Horseman, is that I'm not Yoruba speaking. I don't understand Yoruba, but somehow the Yoruba version came through to me in the most powerful way, which I had never experienced with any production of the English version. I'm not sure whether you can explain how this was possible.
Yes. Well, again, we go back to production, the direction, the actors, the capacity to infuse certain depths of action within a scene. In other words, who handles the scene? But the language, and I think this is where you're headed, this where the language also matters a lot. Akin Shola, who translated my English version into Yoruba, was asked, didn't he have a lot of problem with Wole Soyinka's, the usual critique, convoluted language and complex idioms, etc. And he said, not in the least. He said, the reason is that if you read Wole Soyinka's play, you see that all I did was translate that play back into the language in which he thought it and expressed it. And as far as he was concerned, in other words, even though it was in English, it was a Yoruba play. And so when he translated it back into Yoruba, which in addition was performed by those to whom this was first language, there's bound to be, a kind of electric, verve, which maybe one can never capture in the English version. Having said that, however, I must tell you that the English version also has had an incredible impact on non-Yoruba speaking audiences. As you know, I directed the play in Chicago, in in New York and Washington, in I think, I forget, anyway, other places. And I've watched in non-English speaking places. And I've sat among the audience, which I usually do. I put on my wig and sit there so I can,
wig.
feel what they're feeling.
Uncle Wole, a wig. A wig.
A wig, yeah.
Hey, really? But what kind of wig? What kind of wig?
I've several.
Hey!
During Abacha's period, I had at least 7 wigs, including Rasta. But usually I just put on a cap.
Okay.
And so it's really a thrill. And this again is why I think we in the theater, we have the better of it. How many novelists, can have the pleasure of sneaking into an audience and enjoying their own play, without being detected, you see? All they can do is go and browse in bookshops and look at the novels and leave the book there and go away. We can go back to the theater and just, especially if there are areas we have questions about, you're obliged to watch it professionally as a director to see what can be done between one performance or another. Again, this is part and parcel of the excitement of theater. So it's a good observation. But it speaks, your question speaks to the language of theater, both the language in which it's written and what the French call the langage, which is sort of the interior language within the language.
So I was supposed to have announced that there are some of Professor Soyinka's writings in the bookshop, and he has kindly agreed to sign if you were to buy some. I don't know how many we can do, but so this will be coming up very soon. Let's take a couple more questions, if there are. Oh, sorry. Hi.
Prof,
Please tell us who you are. I'm sorry, I'm one of these teachers.
My name is Hazel.
Yes, okay.
And I do write poems sometimes. I actually want to write a novel very soon. Prof, can you hear me, please?
Yeah, you go ahead. Yes.
Prof, it's such an honor to come and ask this question. I'm almost shaking. But I want to ask, Prof, having the privilege of being one of the post-colonial writers and having the opportunity to see the past and then the present, from your perception, do you think, and I needed to write it, do you think the new African writer has the space and the psychology to be the writer of your kind?
Whoa. The new African writer, it has the psychological, I guess, fortitude to be able to write like you.
Well, I think it's wise not to try to write like any other writer. I think it's wise to just find your own voice, even if, as in some cases that I know, you psychoanalyze yourself or get others to psychoanalyze you. Some writers need that. But I think it just has to do with a responsiveness to phenomena. And by that I mean general phenomena, whether you're writing poetry or plays or even essays. And also phenomena, of course, include the environment, the social environment, the politics of the environment, human relationships. It's a question of responsiveness to it. Are you just an observer, or when you observe, do you want to comment on it in some way, either analytically, in which case you write an essay, or by creative paradigms, which is what the novel or the theater is about. So your question is a difficult one for me to write, to answer. I think it's just that you will decide within yourself whether you have enough, whether there's enough energy within your responses for it to spill over onto paper, onto the laptop, or onto the oral language. It's a difficult question.
Thank you very much. So we are winding up. So, okay, one more.
Hello, sir. Hello, Ma. Today, my name is Chris. I'm a writer. Recently, I heard something some time back, and it boggled me a little bit. It's like syndrome. It says, if you want to get published, write like successful poets. If you want to be an artist, find your own voice. Work that is like something else is easier to publish. Work that challenges will always have a tough road. And I believe, sir, you said you cherish your uniqueness. So I was wondering, how have you stopped yourself from killing your darlings?
Sorry.
All right. So he was quoting, and I'm just going to do a horrible paraphrase of it. But what he was saying was that it appears that if you want to be published, then write like another writer. But if you want to be an artist, then you should write like yourself. And he was also asking, in addition, that how have you managed to kill your darlings? He was saying. I think the film world uses this quite a bit. I just learned about killing darlings on the editorial bench. But anyway, so what would you say to that? Is it true that you can't both be published and be, a genuine artist?
Well, everybody, if you write, you write because you want to communicate, right? You want to communicate with other people. I don't know of any writer, well, maybe there's some who writes and just locks it away and goes about the business. There may be some, they do it to relieve themselves of excess emotion. They feel they've got it out. Like some people come out, scream, and go back in their house and continue normal business. But if you feel that what you're writing is something which might be of value to others, and that requires quite a bit of self-confidence, by the way. You have to have, talking of the psychological condition, yes, as part of it, that you have enough self-confidence to feel that what you've been writing deserves to be seen by other people. And my advice always is, when you write, don't aim straight to be published as a book. Check out literary magazines, journals. Check out the radio programs. Check out television. Check out festivals where you can go and do some reading. Try out what you've written with with friends, with peers, teachers, but eventually be prepared to collect your rejection slips. Treasure them. They are war scars, battle scars. Treasure them, put them in your locker, and then continue writing. And some other time, you might even want to go back and say, okay, let me see why that obtained the rejection. And then you might find things which you hadn't noticed before. So it's a continuous process. Beyond that, I don't have any other advice.
Thank you ever so much. Thank you for cooperating with me, and it's been an immense privilege to have this opportunity to interact with Professor Soyinka in front of all of you. And I hope you're going away with loads and loads of food for thought. Thank you so much for being with us and coming all the way. We are very, very privileged to have had you. Thank you so much.
which is supporting a worthy cause in Choco in Accra. So kindly get those and network. And see you tomorrow at the same place. Thank you so much for coming. Have a good evening. Delegates, please remember.